Hi everyone! Thank you for coming to my Vulnerably Badass YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about George Washington's Mount Vernon. Um, Last Friday, my husband was off, but my son was at school. So we decided to have a little afternoon date, and my husband chose George Washington's Mount Vernon, which is the first president, George Washington's house or plantation. And since I started living in Virginia, East Coast, I've been more interested in American history. Maybe because I'm getting older, before I wasn't really interested, or when I lived in California or Illinois, I didn't really, I don't know, maybe because I was a student studying what I had to study, or young, so I wasn't really interested in the history there, or I didn't feel much history. But here in East Coast, I really feel history a lot, and so I've been more interested in history. So I'm thankful that my husband chose this place, a historical place with a lot of nature. So we visited. And there are so many things you can do at the place if you are just interested in visiting as a kind of like touristic site. Then there are so many different kinds of tour events always happening, and you need to check online and register. But we were like kind of last minute, so we just did the basic, the house tour. And so first of all, I was happy to find what Mount Vernon was, because I was already familiar with the name Mount Vernon because I was walking or running on Mount Vernon Trail, which is long along the Potomac River. But I found that, oh, okay, it's the house, the trail that leads to, or that is from the Mount Vernon, George Washington's plantation, is called Mount Vernon Trail. And the house tour, it was like a group of maybe 10-ish people, and we go in, and each room we stop, and there is a person who explains about what the room is about, and how George Washington, how he wanted to make the room, and how he enjoyed hosting guests, and not guest room, but the like nice dining room where you invite guests. There is kind of patterns, but George Washington, because of his identity as a farmer, he wanted to use these plants as a, what do you call, motif or pattern. So that was interesting. And also there was a key from Bastille prison that was given to George Washington, and so I was like, oh, okay. So the house tour itself was, oh, okay, but I was personally interested in looking at the kitchen, how they made the stuff, or what kind of tool they used back then. But more than that, what caught my eye was outside of the house. I mean, even in the house, they talk about slavery, how the slaves were, or on their website they say enslaved people were the main chef, and how the main chef was cooking, and he was really a great chef. And so I wanted to hear more about that. Oh yeah, and then one thing they mentioned is like they had a little chart showing that how 5 of them were living, but 317 people, like graph, were enslaved people. And I was looking at it and wow. And then there were different buildings from the main building, and there was room for male slaves or female slaves or enslaved people, and kind of like 10 bunk beds, and then it was written like 10 to 20 enslaved people were sleeping there, or the dishes or that was there, or how much food was um, served as a ration, like corn, not cornbread, but what was it called? Corn, kind of like flat, probably harder, like kind of biscuit kind of looking thing, and then salted the fish one piece like this. And also there was a picture of this main chef, but I don't know when they started to talk about it or show it, because I don't know, but I was wondering, is it kind of the influence of Black Lives Matter movement, or even after the civil rights movement in the 60s they started talking about it or giving credits to, to really talk about what the enslaved people did to keep the plantation going. So I'm not sure, but at least we were able to read about it and study about it, and maybe there are, if we want to learn more, maybe there are more information it could be there. But I thought, it was shocking, but at the same time it was a good way for me to learn as a beginning. So after visiting, I started reading on Wikipedia too, more about it. And I think the two enslaved people who were kind of discussed or introduced by the tour guides, the main chef people or woman, this woman person, when I read on the Wikipedia, they were the two people who got freed, who, what's the word? Maybe I'm not using the right word, but ran away from Mount Vernon and became free. And I also read about how when George Washington was president in Philadelphia, he made sure that he moved these enslaved people or servants so that they don't stay more than 6 months, because in Philadelphia, if enslaved people stay for 6 months, then they can be freed. And I was like, wow, that's kind of like shocking. And I think it's in the Wikipedia said there was still the kind of identity of George Washington was more of a farmer of Virginia. And yeah, because that's the time, I think still the mentality was different. But anyway, I was reading that, and it was a whole new, not really new information, because I read some of the information or I knew, but I think it's more felt real to me, because this is where I live and very close, and I'm really feeling the American, history. So yeah, it was a great, learning experience for me. And another thing that I really liked was that there was a lady who was walking around in the traditional dress. So I thought that was just a random lady who's just walking in the costume. But when I started talking to her, or when I listened to her accent, and her accent was different. And because I'm not a native speaker, I can't tell, what it was. So I asked her, is that the kind of accent that was used back then? And then she said, oh yes, like my family is whatever descent, and all the Europeans are mixed. So she didn't speak as herself, modern self, or actress, but she spoke as someone from that era. And that's amazing. But I'm so amazed. How did you study? So I still try to talk to this actress, right? Because I'm interested in, as a linguist or a person who likes different languages. And she still tried to talk to me in her character. So she said, oh, it's just a matter of, maybe my accent is different, but this is a lot of research. I like a lot of reading, and also, she said, I wrote a lot of, and it's not so much of the, it's about pronunciation, but it's more about what vocabulary you use in my era. And I used to write a lot of letters to my family and friends. So by researching and reading, I used those vocabulary. So she was kind of trying not to get out of the character, but answer my question. So I was like, wow, she's so professional and I love it. And then as I talked to her and she more talked about herself, like, oh, the general is blah, 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 or I kind of started thinking like, oh, are you Mrs. Washington? And then like, yes, I'm Martha. And like, oh, wow, I am talking to spouse, Martha Washington. And then I asked her about what her life was, because the way she talks is like, I can tell it's like she must have read so many books or whatever resources. So whatever she talked about is so much in detail. So I asked her, well, I saw that you have, in this plantation you have 300 and some, 17 slaves, and then you have a lot of servants and people helping you, and then, it was back in those days. And I asked her, I wonder, what do you do every day? And she told me that it's more like managing people, because if you do not manage and then get things done, then as the spouse of the, the lady of the house, you will be judged. But then the way she talked had so much details from the time back then, and all the vocabularies and all the historical facts, which I don't remember and I cannot share with you right now. But I just remember I was amazed about how detail oriented, and I can even envision what she's talking about. So I think that was the most amazed part, and I'm thankful that you really feel as if you were there at Mount Vernon when they were alive and you were talking to them. So I thought that was so professional, and I even wondered what happened when she's day off. Do we have like 3 or 4 people who can do this job, or is she the only one? Like, I was so amazed at her professionalism. But anyway, so these 2 things were something that I think I learned, or intellectually very stimulated, like what happened to the enslaved people at Mount Vernon and the life back then. And lastly but not least, the view from the house was amazing. It's on the hill, and at the bottom of the hill you have the Potomac River. You can see all the way, and I was like, wow, it's a really great spot to have such a house. And so I enjoyed it. I know it was like how long, 3 hours, or maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So I know there are a whole lot more there, so I'd love to go back and learn more, feel more, see more, if I have chance. So my question to you is, what kind of historical places have you visited, and what have you felt? What have you learned? What did you see? So thank you for coming to my Vulnerably Badass YouTube channel, and see you next time.